Hello and welcome. Dive into our content, hit that subscribe button, and make sure to enable notifications. Nash Caldwell was always convinced he understood Juniper better than anyone else. After all, they had shared 5 years of marriage, filled with happiness, challenges, and dreams for the future. He vividly recalled the day he proposed, the sparkle in her eyes when she accepted, thinking they had everything perfectly aligned. However, that evening, as they sat at the kitchen table with the distant hum of the TV in the background, Juniper casually mentioned something that brought Nash's world to a halt. With the same ease one might use to discuss the weather or a new eatery, she said she was going out with a colleague on Friday. Nash blinked repeatedly, waiting for her to add something to make it sound less outrageous. Yet Juniper simply reached for another slice of bread, spread some butter, and carried on as if nothing unusual had occurred. Nash needed a moment to gather his thoughts. Perhaps he had misheard her. Maybe she was testing his sense of humor with a poorly timed joke. But the way her eyes remained fixed on her plate, avoiding his gaze, made an unsettling feeling creep over him. "What?" he inquired, his voice calmer than the situation warranted. Juniper looked up, and for the first time, Nash noticed something different, something calculated, as if she had anticipated precisely this reaction. "It's just dinner. It doesn't alter anything between us," she replied, her voice disconcertingly light. "I love you, and this won't affect our marriage." Nash held her gaze, searching for a crack in her cool composure. But Juniper appeared completely at ease, as if she believed everything was perfectly normal. His fork lay untouched on his plate, his appetite vanished. His heart thudded in his chest, but he wasn't about to let it show. He wouldn't give her that satisfaction. Juniper seemed to expect him to unravel, anticipating an angry outburst, a barrage of indignant questions, or an ultimatum. Yet Nash was different, and if there was one thing he excelled at, it was keeping his emotions in check when it counted. He inhaled deeply and let it out slowly. He had decided that if this was a game, he wasn't going to lose. To Juniper's astonishment, a slight smile tugged at the corner of his lips. "I see," he said, his tone almost disinterested, as he took a sip from his water glass. Juniper's breathing grew slightly uneven. It wasn't glaringly apparent, but Nash noticed, and that was enough to confirm his suspicion. She didn't seek his permission, she wanted a reaction. Silence stretched between them, feeling endless. Juniper attempted to conceal her confusion by focusing on her food, but Nash continued to watch her with deliberate patience. "Well," he added, now sounding almost too casual, "perhaps I should go out with someone too, just to experience it." That was when Juniper truly looked at him, her practiced calm replaced by something new, uncertainty. Nash couldn't hide his satisfaction at the slight tremor in her hand as she held her fork. She blinked a few times, trying to process what he'd just said. She hadn't anticipated this. She hadn't expected Nash to respond this way. "You met someone?" she inquired, trying to sound indifferent. He kept smiling and shrugged. "There's a woman at the gym I talk to a lot. It might be interesting to go out with her someday." That's when Juniper's face lost a bit of its color. The tables had turned, and Nash hadn't even begun to play in earnest. The ensuing silence was deafening. Juniper's confident facade slipped momentarily. And Nash saw it clearly. The fork she held hovered in midair above her plate, motionless. Her eyes, once filled with certainty, were now slightly wider, as if her mind was attempting to comprehend the unexpected response she'd just heard. Nash maintained a faint smile, reclining in his chair as if the conversation held no significance for him. Internally, however, he relished the satisfaction of seeing Juniper experience the same uncertainty he had just moments earlier. "Oh, I see," she muttered, attempting to regain her composure. She averted her gaze, toying with her food. Nash noticed the slight movement of her leg beneath the table, a tremor she tried to conceal. He knew her well enough to recognize she wasn't as confident as she appeared. Why the sudden unease? If she truly believed going out with someone else was trivial, why did the notion of him doing the same unsettle her so much? Nash realized Juniper had been testing him, but now the test was backfiring. "Is there a problem with that?" he asked in a casual tone. She let out a short laugh and shook her head. Of course not. I just wasn't expecting that from you. He raised an eyebrow. Funny, he said, crossing his arms, because I wasn't expecting this from you. This time, Juniper didn't laugh. His words struck a chord, and the facade of lightness she had maintained began to crumble. She tried to compose herself, lifting her chin and speaking with feigned nonchalance. So, who's this woman at the gym? Nash smiled inwardly. He had anticipated that question. What intrigued him most was Juniper's inability to hide her sudden interest. Previously, she had tossed out the idea of relationship freedom as if it were a modern concept they could explore without fear. Now, merely mentioning another woman put her on the defensive. I'm not sure it matters that much, he said, picking up a napkin to dab his mouth. If it doesn't change anything between us, I don't see a reason to get into details. Juniper let out another short laugh, but the tension on her face was unmistakable. So it's for real? You're actually going out with her? Nash tilted his head, studying her, as if trying to decipher her thoughts. You're the one who said you wanted us to explore this together, right? She opened her mouth to respond, but found herself at a loss for words. For the first time that night, Juniper seemed speechless. The tension in the room was almost palpable. The confidence she had displayed when suggesting this game was slipping away. What was meant to test her hold over Nash was morphing into something entirely different. Nash had what he wanted, the assurance that Juniper never truly expected him to agree to her plan and, more importantly, the realization that she was on the verge of losing something she never thought she could. Without another word, he finished his water and rose from the table. Good night, Juniper. She remained seated, watching him exit the kitchen with a distant expression. In that moment, Nash knew he wasn't just turning the tables, he was in control. In the days that followed, a shift occurred between Nash and Juniper. The house, once filled with casual chatter and predictable routines, now echoed with silences that spoke louder than words. Nash carried on with his usual routine, acting as if he was unfazed by the events of that evening. He left for work, returned home at the usual time, but now he seemed lighter. It was then that Juniper began to grasp the reality of the situation. Initially, she convinced herself it was a phase, that Nash was merely feigning indifference to make her relent. But Nash didn't waver, in fact, he became even more enigmatic. The first time Juniper experienced genuine discomfort was on a Wednesday morning as she sipped her coffee. She watched Nash in front of the hallway mirror, meticulously adjusting his shirt collar. Although this wasn't an unusual routine, his attention to detail was new, checking himself over, smoothing his hair, and then, with a smile, glancing at his phone. Juniper couldn't ignore the sudden quickening of her heart, experiencing, for the first time, a fear she'd never associated with her husband, the fear of losing him. Despite trying to mask her unease throughout the day, the image of him at the mirror lingered in her mind. Who was messaging Nash? Had he truly found someone? That evening, as they sat on the couch watching TV, she casually remarked, "You seem a lot more upbeat lately." Without diverting his gaze from the screen, Nash gave a small smile. Do I? She crossed her legs, attempting to maintain a casual demeanor. Yeah, almost like you've been busier. This time, he looked at her, pausing before responding. His eye seemed to evaluate her, as if assessing her intent. Then, calmly, he said, "Yeah, I guess I'm making better use of my time." The way he said it sent a chill through Juniper. In the days that followed, she found herself observing Nash more closely than ever before. His phone seemed to receive more messages. Occasionally, he would go for a run earlier than usual. One day, he returned home from work and headed straight to the shower, humming a tune she didn't recognize. That was when her worst fear materialized. On Friday, the same day she had planned to go out with her coworker, Nash casually announced at breakfast, "I'm going out tonight." Juniper's coffee cup halted midway to her lips. "Oh, yeah?" She attempted to sound indifferent. "Yeah, with that woman from the gym." It felt like a blow to the stomach. She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. Her mind raced, searching for a logical retort, some way to redirect the conversation. But there was no alternative path. Nash had accepted the terms of the game she had initiated, and now, for the first time, Juniper wasn't sure she was prepared to play. That night, Juniper found herself home alone. Nash departed without haste, wearing a shirt she didn't even recall him owning, the scent of his cologne lingering in the hallway. He offered no details, didn't inquire about her plans, and seemed utterly unconcerned by her supposed date. That realization hit Juniper with crushing weight. She hadn't planned to go out. The co-worker who was meant to have dinner with her sent messages to confirm their plans, but she didn't respond. How could she? Her thoughts were entirely consumed by Nash. She paced the house for hours, trying to convince herself none of it mattered, but with each passing minute, the tightness in her chest intensified. Almost without realizing, she picked up her phone, opening and closing apps aimlessly, seeking any distraction. Yet deep down, she understood what she was truly doing, waiting for him to send a message, waiting for him to return early, hoping this was all a game he'd abandon at the last minute. But Nash didn't return early. He didn't message. He showed no sign of regret. That's when real desperation set in. Juniper spent the night on the couch, the TV playing some random show that she paid no attention to. Her eyes were fixed on the door, waiting for the familiar sound of keys in the lock. When Nash finally arrived, it was after 3 in the morning. He entered calmly, with no hint of hurry or remorse. Juniper could see he hadn't expected her to be awake, but she was. And in that moment, something inside her broke. "How was it?" she asked, her voice softer than she intended. Nash removed his jacket, draping it over a chair, and regarded her with the same neutral expression he'd worn for days. It was good. Those simple, direct words cut through her like a cold blade. Panic surged through her. She wanted to probe, demand details, hear him say it was a mistake and meant nothing, but the words wouldn't come. Nash wasn't concealing anything, nor was he showing remorse, and perhaps that was the most unsettling part. He crossed the living room and disappeared down the hall to the bedroom, as if the conversation had reached its conclusion. Juniper remained, paralyzed, her heart pounding so fiercely it echoed in her ears. She had wanted to toy with Nash, to test his resolve, to see him uncertain, but now she silently pleaded for it all to be just a game. Only Nash wasn't playing anymore. The following morning, Juniper awoke to an unfamiliar sensation, genuine, overwhelming fear. Fear that Nash had changed, fear that she'd crossed a line from which there was no return. She rose slowly, her body weighed down by the anxiety of the previous night. Entering the kitchen, she found Nash sipping coffee as though nothing had transpired. His calm, distant demeanor twisted her stomach into knots. It was like facing a stranger. He didn't acknowledge her entrance, didn't even glance up from his phone, merely continued scrolling and occasionally sipping his coffee. Clearing her throat in an attempt to alleviate the tightness, she ventured, "You got home late," striving for a casual tone. Nash remained largely impassive. "I did," he replied simply. His indifferent response only heightened her nerves. Juniper pulled out a chair and sat across from him, searching his eyes for any sign of hesitation, any indication this was still a game. But Nash didn't appear to be feigning anything. He seemed genuinely detached, and the realization terrified her in ways she had never anticipated. "Nash," her voice trembled. She loathed her vulnerability, but couldn't help it. "What are we doing here?" He finally met her gaze, studying her for a moment as if deliberating whether it was worth responding. Then, with a chilling calm, he said, "You tell me. After all, this was your idea, wasn't it?" Juniper felt her stomach drop. I never thought you'd really go through with it." Nash let out a laugh, devoid of amusement, the laugh of someone who had finally pieced everything together. "What did you expect? That I'd beg you to change your mind?" She opened her mouth, but he didn't wait. "I've spent the last few days thinking about this, Juniper. Thinking about what it means that you'd suggest something like this. Thinking about what that says about us." She felt a tightening in her chest. "Nash, I messed up." He didn't blink. You did. They sat in silence for a moment, a painful lull between them. Juniper wanted to scream that it was all a huge mistake, that she never should have conceived such a reckless idea, but deep down she knew it wouldn't change anything. Nash had made his decision. He stood, carried his mug to the sink, and rinsed it with the calmness of completing a morning ritual. Then he turned to her, and with a cold expression, said something that took her breath away. "Thank you for showing me who you really are." With that, he left the kitchen without hesitation. A chill ran down Juniper's spine. She remained there, the panic in her chest intensifying. A few minutes later, when she finally gathered the courage to enter the bedroom, she discovered a stack of papers on the table. The divorce papers, already signed. Juniper's world collapsed in an instant. She had wanted to test Nash, to see how far he would go. But in the end, she was the one who lost everything. Juniper leaned against the bedroom door, watching Nash retrieve a suitcase from the closet. The sound of the zipper slicing through the heavy silence confirmed it was over. Driven by desperation, she stepped forward, clinging to any remaining shred of control. "Nash, please," Juniper's voice trembled as she attempted a smile that resembled more of a plea. "This went too far. I forgive you for going out with that woman from the gym. Let's just forget all of it. If you forget what I said about going out with a coworker, I'll forget what you did. Let's start over." Nash hesitated momentarily, his grip tightening on the suitcase. He looked at Juniper and recognized the fear in her eyes, not fear born out of love, but fear of losing her grip on the situation. He let out a short, humorless laugh and shook his head. "I don't need your forgiveness, Juniper. These last few days taught me something important, and now I realize I deserve more than this," he said, closing the suitcase. He picked up his keys and walked out without a backward glance. The finality of the lock clicking shut was the last sound Juniper heard before the oppressive silence enveloped her. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this content, remember to subscribe and turn on notifications for more updates. See you next time.